away from yourself while, because we're going to do the quiz first. So I just realized that this method is a good cheat sheet. So put it aside where it's not visible. Your phone should go into your bag and put this where you cannot see it during the quiz, please. Yep. So the question is just what is said about political realism? Can you put this one? Okay, please wrap up.
I think I got it.
Okay, so a few words. I will try to finish grading as soon as I can, but as you can imagine, I cannot read too many at once. So it takes time to do a few at a time. And in terms of these quizzes, as you know, this was the 6th quiz, and I think you have 5 more to go or something like that. And you know that the 3 lowest scores will be taken out so that you're graded only on the best, however many, that's 8 of them or something like that. So, at every quiz, enough people get the answer correct, like get full 3 points, which means people who haven't been doing very well, if you feel that way, just know that you can get better. It's other people do it, which means it's not that difficult. But I hope you will put a lot of work into the second half of the semester. So we're now, today we will be the assignment is a little bit different, and that for the presenters, it probably was, maybe you felt that it was a little bit unfair. Everybody else is figure out don't think that I would not put into consideration. But some people like this sort of reading too. So there's no reason to think that this is somehow more difficult. So for some people, literature is very difficult because it doesn't tell you exactly what to think. So it's really a question of one's taste. And so so this week we are reading this for today, and then on for the pre-recorded lecture, I posted a very short reading. It's the final essay from this book of essays titled The Myth of Sisyphus, and then you got the last chapter that is titled The Myth of Sisyphus. And it's really a little thing. It's three, 4 pages, and basically in the lecture I kind of like basically read half of the short essay and annotating basically what to look out for in the different passages. So it would be good if you can listen to the lecture while looking at the reading on a different browser, so you can kind of go back and forth. Unless you want to print it out, then that of course that's even better. So the point of this week is to kind of have a review of what we've done so far, and also to get us ready for the second half of the semester, because we're now meeting a new writer starting next week, right? For the next 3 weeks, we're reading Dostoevsky before returning to Camus for the final 2 weeks of the semester. Dostoevsky is not mentioned here, but as I said at the beginning of the semester, Camus was very much influenced by Dostoevsky, influenced in a very positive way, in the sense that he really admired Dostoevsky. And so when you read the assignments for the next 3 weeks, it would be helpful if you can try to think the possible connections between the 2 authors, but then the connections will really become clear when we get to the final novel by Camus, The Fall. There you really cannot not see how these 2 authors actually resonate with one another. So with Dostoevsky, the question, religion, Christianity is a huge question. And part of what this author is talking about, transcendentalism or transcendental or metaphysics, these concepts are all, of course, connected with religion, the decline of religion, and what that has done to us in modernity. So that's the kind of link that is not directly stated here, but if you read this article carefully, it will help you as we move on to next 3 weeks' readings. Okay, so we have 2 presenters today. I think Yun, you're first, right?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Would you like to?
Sure.
Anyone missing Victor's handout? Everyone has a copy? I'm sorry, I should have helped you with that. I didn't mean to make you go around, but I guess that way you get a perspective of what I see here, so maybe you can, it'll be good for you. Can I have a copy?
So physical intervention. Yeah, I think so. It gives ability. I think that's what. It's can be difficult. Well, now. It will be right now. It's a bit late now.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'd like to introduce an paper, the title of Camus and Nietzsche on Politics in an Age of Absurdity, written by Sean Derek Italy. On your handout, my handout title says that from absurdity to rebellion, Camus' response to Nietzsche's nihilism. And this title well shows what we are going to discuss today. And let me go into the introduction. So the core claim of the paper is Nietzsche's critique of metaphysics is the point of departure for Camus' thinking about the absurdity. Camus then turns that starting point into an ethics of revolt that tries to resist the excesses of absolutist politics. In other words, the laws of transcendence does not provide a permission to dominate. Instead, it demands limits, dialogue, and solidarity. And this is the key argument of the article. And let me make the vocabularies more clear. And for Camus, absurdity is not a mood. It is the confrontation between humans' need for meaning and the silence of the world. You will find this definition almost word for word at the beginning of the paper's introduction. And next, nihilism following Nietzsche is what happens when the old foundations collapse and we keep the moral vocabulary but lose its ground. The result is an ethical and political vacuum. Now, why does absurdity become a problem? Because absent traditional sources of transcendence, political ideologies become the ground for meaning and action in contemporary life. That line is quoted on your handout under the Idea 1 section, and it is central theme because the state and ideologies began to offer the horizons instead of the religion. And this is the bridge from private absurdity to public nihilism. So to be specific, let's talk about the Idea 1, the title from absurdity to nihilism. Nietzsche warns that with the death of God, we face the erosion of our highest values. Camus accepts that the diagnosis, but asks what follows in politics. The article shows that when transcendence declines, the temptation is to replace it with totalizing histories, teleologies, and political religions. These promise meaning, a direction, and even redemption, but often it justifies present pain for a future goal. This is a key for the paper. To illustrate the shift from personal absurdity to political nihilism, the paper turns to Camus's play Caligula. On your handout, the key example captures the logic. The emperor decides that if nothing has value, then everything is permitted. From an awareness of meaninglessness, he draws the rule of action of cruelty. Camus uses this as a tool to show us what nihilism is. The The article emphasizes that Caligula's nihilism follows directly from his absurd awareness, and that is the danger what the paper wants our readers to observe. However, the article is very careful. It does not say that a private absurdity must always become the public problem. It says the vacuum invites political projects to fill it, and those projects often rely on teleological justifications. Camus calls this kind of politics as the form of realism, but it's actually working as a critical term for his perspective. And that is exactly what Camus wants to resist. So Ehrling organized this idea in the body paragraph of idea 1. So up to this point, now we can move to the second idea, beyond Nietzsche, creation and the ethics of rebellion. Please look at the idea 2 and the key point box on your handout. Then the connective tissue between Nietzsche and Camus is creation. And this is the key sentence of this paragraph. Nietzsche says that values are not just given, but they are made by individuals. And Camus agrees with this idea, but he changes the subject and the scale of it. He moves from a solitary self-legislation to a shared idea. In practice, that becomes the revolution. Not a revolution with a blueprint, but revolt as a stance. It is rooted in the lived experience and bounded by the limits and sustained by dialogue and solidarity. And let me explain it more plainly. And so, if there are no external laws in our society that does not authorize anything and the everything, it actually makes some limits to our society, and it is become more urgent because we can no longer hide behind the metaphysical guarantees or historical inevitabilities. The paper shows Camus insisting, we must keep the tension between the means and the ends alive. The report holds that tension. It judges actions by experience, the experience, especially experience of suffering. To see what this looks like, the article turns to novel, The Plague, the novel that we studied in this semester. Camus stages the transition from solitary protest to a shared participation. The interview quote in the handout, the reference section of the idea 2, it says, compared to the stranger, the plague goes beyond any possible discussion. It represents the transition from an attitude of solitary revolt to the recognition of a community whose struggles must be shared. And this interview quotation very well represents the transition to solidarity. The protagonist, Dr. Ryu, does not explain evil away. He attends to suffering or works with others and creates meaning through the action. The appeal that here is acknowledge absurdity and then act together with restraint. So what exactly is Camus making is the paper is truly honest. The Camus doesn't formulate a system, but he offers an attitude. The rebellion is a way of standing in the world, and he says, keep your eyes on experience, avoid prophetic history, accept uncertainty, and protect human limits. Lastly, let's go to the interpretive argument to conclude this article. Ehrling argues that Nietzsche's anti-metaphysical idea basically provided frame for Camus' absurdity. Camus shows how vacuum caused by collapse of transcendence allowed political religions, and different from Nietzsche's self-affirmation, Camus treats creation as a shared idea. Rebellion, based on the creation, keeps the tension between the idea and experiences so that the values are keeping created. And to wrap up our article, to conclude the Nietzsche's diagnosis, the crisis, which is the death of metaphysics, and shows us how the desire for certainty can morph into political pathology. Camus accepts the diagnosis but also refuses it. Instead, he suggests the idea of revolt. Revolt is creation under the limit, dialogue, and the solidarity. It guards the tension between means and ends. Before I wrap up my presentation, I would like to suggest two discussion questions at the back of the handout. Could I read the discussion question?
Yes, please. Yes.
The first question is, Nietzsche considers the values created by the individual, but Camus shifted it to a shared creation in solidarity between two perspectives, which could you honestly follow in your real life? And second one is, Camus points out that rebellion is different from revolution. He emphasized the significance of limits, dialogue, and solidarity within the lived experience. In real-world issues, how could we apply Camus' style rebellion into practice? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I open up for general questions and comments, I just, because you're not always reading the handout, I got very dizzy trying to find where you are, so I missed some points that you were saying. I don't know if people have the same experience, but I couldn't quite match what's written here with what you're saying. So my question is, you said something about Camus not offering, I think it was under the second idea, under explanation, there you were elaborating on your point, and you said something about him offering an attitude instead of some kind of solution. You used the word attitude. Can you say something more about that? Can you explain?
So my point was the Camus doesn't formulate the exact social system like the political religion, the term that the author used in this article, but actually the Camus suggested a stance for the people. That is what I mean by the attitude. So
Okay.
the Camus doesn't actually make the exact fixed social system, but he suggested the idea for the new ideology.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Now, please feel free to offer comments, ask questions. Or you can answer the discussion questions.
While I was listening to your presentation, I'm going to answer the question number one. While I was listening to your presentation and the first question, it kind of made me think about the two different social systems that we have global, the communism and capitalism, and created by the individual here reminds me of the capitalism, while creation of solidarity and the collective responsibility makes me think about communism. And if I would answer personally, I would say that I would prefer the creation in solidarity because we're all living in society, and I believe that the accumulated and aggregated good from the whole society is better than just one from one person. So I would prefer the kind of view. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
For me, I think like realistically, everyone should be a little bit of both. So life is not like completely pink. So from this point of view is nice and real. Like solidarity is really important in the society. But sometimes you might be the one like showing solidarity to others, but they won't return it. So in some case, you need to be a little bit individual, even if you don't have to be completely into a point of view or completely convinced. I think everyone should be a little bit of both, and like it's the combination of everything that makes it.
Yes. I mean, that's what people like to, I will do some writing today on the board. This is what people say, balance. And I will explain why I do not like the word. But we'll get to that. we have enough, but what you said is what people would sum up as, okay, you need to have a balance. But there's another way of agreeing with you without going through balance. So that's what I want to kind of get to it. Okay, but what's interesting about the first question is you said, which could you honestly follow in your real life? So it's like, it's not a simple question. You're adding something there. What do you mean by honestly? So
When I get this question, if I answer this question socially, I will say the creation is solitary. But I think if someone answer individually and quietly without the opening their answer in their mind, someone could answer the first perspective by saying. So that's the reason why I put the word honestly here.
So does it mean that people live by their own values that they have created? Are enough people that strong? I wonder. That takes a lot of fortitude to be able to create your own values. Yeah.
I mean, I know that Camus' discussion about this comes in response to Nietzsche, but I actually think that if you, to me, whenever I receive these ideas at the same time, I think of Camus' idea of being an upper stack, and then Nietzsche is kind of the bullet point beneath, where there's an arrow going down, and then another arrow circling back around. That makes sense. So whereas saying that creation and solidarity, they will constantly influence one another in the purpose that you can find yourself within. So that's why I actually also agree, I don't think really saying balance is quite the right word, because there is an imperative imbalance between these two things. But in my view, for myself, when I say what am I honestly considering myself between these two perspectives, I would say that what is the absurd is that I'm constantly pulled between the two, since I'm pulled between my own interpretation of society, and I can only live within that experience. But then society is also garnered of the individual shared experience of our reality. So therefore, there is absurd in the concept because they're contingent on one another, but they're also not contingent. So that's my understanding of it.
Yeah. I mean, a very simple way of putting it is that if you live only by the values that you have created, you would never do what you don't want to do. And yet, let's just be honest, most people are doing things that they don't want to do all the time. So they're right there. I mean, it's something. It's not that simple, right? And we are not that simple. That's the point, right? Okay. Any other? I mean, Camus' style of rebellion is something that I mean, I will. Because I don't want to say too much because there's another presentation, but because this is important that he differentiates revolt and rebellion. So in a way, I mean, I'm going to get to this, but the difference between the two in understanding how they're related to each other, we kind of arrive at a point that some of you have made, including Podesta, but without going through this kind of common understanding of balance. So this is how we're going to get there. But his style of rebellion, I mean, obviously, what we mean by his style of rebellion is that it is opposed to revolution. That's probably what you meant, right? Yeah. So that's the third term that we have to figure out. So, okay. Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask a question? So this paper says that the protagonist of the play, Dr. Ryu, embodies the ideals of Camusian rebellion. And at the same time, you said that Nietzsche considers values created by the individual, but Camus shifts it to shared creation and solidarity. Then why do you think, I mean, I'm just asking your personal opinion, why do you think Camus chose an individual to embody the ideals of Camusian rebellion instead of a collective?
I think I need some more time to answer your question about that.
But that's really going back to this relation that we will return to how revolt, because revolt is characterized as an individual act, and so we will have to figure out the relation exactly between revolt and rebellion. So yes, rebellion is collective, but then what's the position? Theoretically, what is revolt doing in relation to that? So that's kind of in parallel with the question, why he uses particular individual, and yet the book is about a rebellion, a new kind of a revolution without the teleology, basically. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. Yeah.
First of all, about having Victor, before I start, I need to make a few disclaimers, because as you said, this is a scholarly article, so I thought in order to not make it all just summaries and just going over the text, I thought it would be more fun and kind of in line with the rest of the presentations to do my own two interpretive theses. Yeah, and then take that thesis and connect it back to the books that we've read so far. Okay, so I'll just start with thesis A, which is absurd, lucidity, limits, both limits and solidarity. So Camus defines the absurd as the clash between our needs for meaning and a mute world. And we kind of see that in the myth of Sisyphus. So lucidity, it's not really a grand theory. It's a way of seeing that. It's a way of seeing that refuses, both the metaphysical comfort and also the despair. And if you remember in the plague, then Liu models this stance as well, and he names this situation as as absurd, but then he works, and that naming that shows us that it's not resignation. It's the beginning of what I just call measure, right? Because if the meaning is not given, we must then not invent future ends that crush kind of living people now. So no end, basically what I'm saying is that no end can justify methods that deny present suffering. So the work becomes specific, and it comes down to what reduces harm here and now, and also within human limits, because we're just humans. And we see this, in sanitary teams and with the civic routines in Oran, because they're organizing rosters and red kits as well. And they choose means that fit the limits of the present, if that makes sense. They do what they can, or they do what can be done without promising salvation. Right? And we also see that in the next part from the close reading, the ethics are inside these sentences. So if you just read, I'll just read it here. So I know it's an absurd situation, but we're all involved in it, and we must accept it as it is. So that's from the plain. And the verbs are plain. It's know, or involved, or accept. But pronoun is plural. So there's a movement there that it's basically a movement from fact to duty. Right? There's no flourishing. There's no heroic register or anything. And the style, it sort of functions like aesthetics. Style functions as aesthetics. And with clarity, it also refuses false hope, and also refuses theatrical despair. So the sentence, it kind of guides method. It names the condition, stays with it, and acts within limits. And that is why Camus links lucidity to solidarity, in my opinion. And the recognition that we're all involved leads to obligations that are present, tense, and concrete. And I just want you to kind of hold that rule of measure as well, just hold it in mind, because I'm going to carry it forward into a brief prompt for the room, if that's okay. Question, it's not a discussion question, but just a prompt.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the prompt here, the question is like, how does Rio's acceptance guide what counts as justified action in a crisis? So, and that's just the question for now. Like, does anybody have an answer for that? No hands, okay.
They usually take a few more minutes, a few more seconds than that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
For me, in time of crisis, the most important thing to do is not to cry about the problem, but to actually try to look at the solution to the problem. Because anyway, the problem is already there. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? So I think that Rio's acceptance is justified because I think he was the most realistic person, I think also. Because everyone started, the first reaction, which is also normal, was to directly cry, oh, what are we gonna do? But Rio just calmed down and started looking for solutions. Should we look for like a vaccine? Should we do? So I think, yeah, that's the reason why it's the
Yeah, good. That's also what I was looking for in those two cues as well, right? Like present tense, responsibility, and harm reduction, right? Again, these are sort of means that also fit within human limits, right? Doing what we can, right? But basically, if lucidity gives limits, I think we sort of established that, then what gives creation without transcendence? So this is my thesis B, right? So creation as communal civic craft. So, but Camus agrees that Camus agrees with Nietzsche that creation answers, the shock of truth. And there's a quote here like, the absurd joy par excellence is creation. Art and nothing but art, said Nietzsche, right? We have art in order to not die of truth. Right? That's what he lives. But Camus, he redirects that creation, right? It's not the solitary grandeur, or like the exceptional individual. Creation becomes shared in practice. See that again in the plague, right? Creation looks like civic craft. Again, I mentioned the rosters and the records. There's mutual aid and teams that hold the moral world together. Right? And the work, it's ordinary, as I also mentioned before. It's ordinary and it's repeatable, but it maintains recognition and care. It produces a sort of form of life that reduces harm, and without invoking transcendence. And you can also see this redirection in a small stubborn scene with Joseph Grom. And here, Grant, he labors over one sentence per pages. He revises the same line again and again. But on the surface, it's comic, right? It's kind of comic. It's a little bit funny, and sad as well. But underneath it, there's a profile of creation and patient craft. And granted, he's not composing a grand myth or anything, but he's tuning in a form so that it fits. So it fits what is there. And the city, it kind of mirrors this practice as well, right? The records are updated, the rosters are revised, and teams are reallocated. And these repeated acts, they do not promise salvation, as we've established, but they hold, again, as I've said before, a moral world together, by sustaining attention and accuracy and care. This form, it's humble. I think that's one of the best words for it right now. But it's also, it's creative in Camus' sense, I think. And it builds something that can be lived in together. And I kind of want to transition, like you also, as you mentioned, like how do you pronounce his name? Dostoevsky? Yeah,
I think so. Is there sorry,
Russian speaker?
Russian speaker?
Okay.
Okay.
Same.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because I want to use him to kind of sharpen this things, if that makes sense. I want to use him. So this goes outside of the reading. But Dostoevsky, he often routes like meaning through faith and the metaphysical types of right. And I think you don't know this one, but do you know the brothers Karamazov?
That's what we're gonna read a chapter from it next
okay.
week. I think next week, yeah, the Grand Inquisitor, that's a chapter from
Yeah.
it.
Well, there, like the suffering, it's interpreted with spiritual struggle, and action is means towards confession, grace, and also revolt against God. And Camus, he shares like this intensity about suffering, but he also withholds transcendence. So where Dostoevsky, he seeks or kind of contests the divine ground of meaning, Camus, he chooses to measure in human present. And well, Dostoevsky's heroes often break towards personal catastrophe and like spiritual triumph. Camus, on the other hand, he figures to keep this civic fabric intact through routines that anyone can join in. And the difference is not indifference, but I want to say that again, the difference is not indifference. It's a wager on communal action that is actionable now. And with both of that, like with all of these species in view, I kind of want to interlock them in one interpretive like synthesis. Also a counter argument to kind of test it. So yeah. So my claim is that like community builds a humane humane politics through linked moves. So first, like city about the absurd refuses consolation of despair. And that the consolation yields limits in solidarity in the present. And then the second part, that creation relocates from solitary will to shared practice, and creation becomes civic craft that holds a moral world together. So the two moves that I've said here, they interlock. So it limits guard against the violence invited by grand futures. Kind of like really big confluence, right? So and communal creation supplies a meaning without transcendence. And I wanted to kind of do a counter argument to test if it actually holds true. So I don't know if you know quietism, but I was asking myself, is this like quietism dressed up in like ethics? And I was thinking, no, like quietism, it would withdraw from this. And community insists on like continuous work. And we also see that with Liu and Grant, they do not stop as well. They organize, they record, they do records and they care for each other. And I also came up with another objection, and that's, without a transcendent end, I call any action better. And my response to that would be that measure gives criteria. It reduces poverty, and it sustains recognition, and it keeps means proportionate to human limits, as I've established and said so many times. But these are public, repeatable standards. Yeah, that others can contest or refine to. So, that's my synthesis and counter argument. There's not like a big conclusion to that, but it's just sort of open-ended. And it's also sort of the same with the discussion questions as well. So I think if I just have to give like a recap, because I think it's a lot. Point A is that lucidity, it sets limits and it sets anchors to solidarity. And then the second point is that creation becomes civic craft that makes a world without appeal like into transcendence, if that makes sense. And then it's discussion questions time. So the first one is in the play part 2. How does, and here quotation marks, we're all involved, we must accept it as it is, guide justified action when trade-offs are unavoidable?
Okay. Are you waiting for people to answer?
Yeah, I'm just waiting.
Yeah, okay. So maybe we can start by talking about what trade-offs are represented in the book.
I think from there is a good example for this.
Sorry?
I think from there.
Yes.
Example
Yeah.
trade-off.
Yeah.
He
loses, not lose, but like for sometimes he loses the love and the hometown while he has to help the people and stay in the place where he's not even,
Right,
yeah,
right,
doesn't even belong there.
right, yeah.
I think self-restriction for the good of everyone is also a trade-off.
Right,
No, I don't know if there's like any right answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's good. And I think we can just move on to question 2.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't quite answer the question, justification.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good start.
Yeah.
We understand what you mean by trade-offs and
Yeah,
yeah.
So question 2, in absurd creation, how does the link between truth and creation clarify why routines and records in Iran count as world making rather than mere paperwork?
Right. So it sounds abstract, but I wonder if anyone can kind of rephrase the question to make it more familiar in a way.
I can attempt to maybe, I don't know about rephrasing, to be honest, maybe answer. Whereas like the idea of what we think of as truth, especially as the like paper talked about, like in decline of the religious or metaphysical acceptance and the rise of scientific modernity. The idea of truth being something a bit more tangible, such as something that's collected in a fact or a record or a statistic, is very much like in the individual practice of the record keeping that they declare cool with that they do in the face of the plague, because it seems to assign control or reason or meaning within understanding what next steps to take for like future building. And that also connects with, like, perhaps they didn't think this at the time, but, or think it consciously. I don't remember it being mentioned in the plague, but all of the records collected eventually are used in scientific research to understand how a microbe spreads or how to control a natural disaster or like something like a disease. So when something like historical determinisms, like how Marx discusses it, it would go back into that type of lens. And I know that was also like referenced in like the article, towards like understanding what we define as a truth and what we would define as being creation. If that makes sense.
Yeah. To me, it makes sense. When anyone would like to continue, yeah.
I think that in the article, in the last part, there was one part that Camus was talking about the art of the Greeks.
Mhm. Yeah.
And there he mentioned that the art is to let us survive. Let me see. The one that you said, art is to help us not die from truth.
Truth, yes, I think.
Yeah. And
Did you quote it somewhere?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
it was in the paper, but that truth is not the truth like the meaning of life, but that truth is that he's saying about the meaningless, that life is meaningless. So what I'm thinking here is that the fact that the plague links the truth and the creation is that real, and other people in the sanitary squad is accepting that the plague itself is an absurdity, and also is the truth that life is meaningless.
Yes.
And then because of that, they are accepting that we have limits. So they're being creative within the limits, as the article mentions. So like these records and then the documents are basically their creations, their contribution to create some sort of new meaning through solidarity.
Right, yeah. Very, very well, very well said. Just the only thing that I would just change a little bit is because it's I think I emphasized it a few times. I know what you mean, but to say life is meaningless, it would mislead other people to think, okay, so life is meaningless. Then it turns into this kind of nihilistic, but I know what you mean. There's no foundational meaning to our existence, which is a bit different from saying life is meaningless, because life is meaningful. That's why we're all here, right? So you see the difference. Yeah, it's just a wording, but it can make a big difference. Yes.
I have a kind of question for you. So, in relation to the second discussion question, why do you think that this was published in the European Journal of Political Theory rather than like a literary criticism journal? Like this was like, I noticed it right before like the class, it was actually in the political theory journal, which I was kind of surprised because it's not talking about strictly like a nation or like similar to lots of other political theory. So I wonder if you like could conceptual, or what do you think about that?
First of all, I didn't know that actually.
Oh.
But I don't think I have a question to that, unfortunately. I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately.
Anyone would like to just hazard a guess why that would be?
Personally, I think that politicians or social scientists in general really like to have like a lot of point of view. So I think this article being published there is just to maybe, okay, I think it kind of criticizes a little bit politics as well. So maybe it's just a point of view of saying, these authors are trying to make critique of how the society is. Then maybe we should pay attention to that as well. Maybe it's a way of saying that, yeah, maybe we should try to find a meaning out of these two authors to maybe improve politics. I think that's the reason.
I mean, we have this idea that philosophy is something abstract, but by now you should know that it is not. That's the whole point of the whole discussion of abstraction that really is supposed to kind of help us revise our general understanding of abstract or abstraction. So philosophy also is affected, if we follow the discussion, our understanding of philosophy is also affected, when we shift our understanding of abstract or abstraction. So when you do politics, you don't just go to the concrete problems directly. When you approach a concrete problem, you're already motivated at a level that is not entirely concrete. So, in a way, one can say the same thing about not just politics, but everything that we do. There's a certain kind of philosophical grounding that motivates you to approach a particular concrete situation or object of your desire. You approach it differently because you have a certain political kind of inclination already motivating you. Does that make sense? So, but here, to answer this question more directly, because this question, political realism, because that's the kind of a problem that he wants to address, meaning political realism in the sense that we actually get a best sense of what that means from Tahu, who talks about how he, after he left home, he joined these political organizations, and then he realized that these people, okay, they have great causes, they are driving toward really a better future and all that, but then they think that in order to achieve these goals, you have to be realistic, meaning you have to kill some people. So he went away from the legalized murder, which is death sentence, which he witnessed his father sentencing a man to. And he thought he was part of this movement that works against legalized murder. And then he discovers that they have their own death sentence integrated into their system, and they call it realism. We're just being realistic. You have to kill off some people in order to get there. So you turn away from one kind of death to another kind of death. So political realism, in the name of, I mean, let's be honest, in the name of democracy today, we make war all the time. So we only get criticism of some rogue organizations killing people, but we don't get criticism about how democratic governments are actually killing people as well. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So it's in that larger context, in order to understand how even democracy works with death, you need to kind of go through this philosophical understanding at a little bit of distance, so you can get back to the concrete field of politics with, I don't know, with a clearer kind of vision, rather than be mired by all the concrete facts that you get bombarded by when you look at the regular mass media. Actually, these days people don't even say mass media. Yeah, it's a very antiquated word now. It's all social media or just media, but they don't say mass media. Okay, so any final comments or questions before? Okay then, thank you so much. Yeah. I'm a little cold, but I don't want to make people suffer from the dry air. You're okay now, right? You're not cold. So I'll run up and get something to put on because I'm a little cold, and I'll be right back. Can you behave yourself?
Yeah, I think this answer makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, your answer makes sense.
When she asked, the last character that communicated.
A character? Did it say character?
I was like, what is
Because she said the last person.
But my question is the guy mentioned to you the last person?
Yeah. I originally thought it was Graham. No, I originally thought it was Graham.
But no, my question is it before the readers? Is it before the revelation?
No, it's okay.
It's almost at the very end. It's like on the last maybe third page. Because he goes to talk to the man that counts peas and then goes up into the terrace. Like the terrace, you know?
Yeah, and this is where the revelation happens. So it was before or part of it. But it
So
depends on
obviously
how the
we
question
start
is
with
the exact word.
metaphysics. And so metaphysics is basically the foundational meaning, any kind of a system of thinking that provides a foundational meaning so we don't have to worry about our existence, which is basically what religion fulfilled. So the foundation disappears with the fall of metaphysics. That means now we were faced with the absurd. In the past, before this collapse of metaphysics, not that existence was not absurd, but people didn't think about it. Because God, to put it very simply, God guaranteed the meaning of your, just like Father Panalu, everything is explained through God. So he doesn't need to wonder about, although he later realized that his relationship with God itself is inflected with the absurd, because nobody is safe from, even if you're a religious person, if you are living in modernity, you cannot not be affected by the absurd, because there's such thing as civilization. So no matter how outstanding you are as an individual, you're positioned within, you're situated within the given civilization of the given historical period. So the fall of metaphysics, or the loss of foundational meaning, means we were now left with the absurd. And from there, it's all our projects in order to deal with this. So, one of the ways in which we deal with the absurd is what he calls political ideology, and a part of it is what he calls political realism. So, in a way, if you just want a quick example, in any political debate, any mentioning of democracy or any mentioning of terrorism, for instance, today, that opposition is enough to just answer all questions. In other words, ideologies have become kind of new foundational ideas. Does that make sense? So our existence is faced with the absurd all the time, and yet we have, we can take refuge in these ideologies that seem so certain. There's no doubt about it. But there are many ideas that function in this way. But I'm just giving you, two most frequently mentioned ideologies in the media: democracy versus terrorism. And if you really look into how these things work, you learn that it's not that clear cut. It's not that simple, because we are not that simple. So anyways, so I just explained what political realism meant in the context of Camus literature. Now, why is it that people run to these ideas as if they really believe that there is such a thing as democracy that is so so unquestionable, right? Why do people do that? I mean, in a way, because we don't have enough energy to read up on everything, so we just have to believe what powerful people say, which is, we all do that. We have to kind of delegate the work of thinking about these things to people who are supposed to know better, and then we respect their opinions, and then we think, okay, democracy is a good thing. And then, of course, there's authenticity there too. People who are actually learning in this area would try to inform ordinary citizens of what's what about democracy and what democracy is fighting against, things like that. And so there is some authenticity there, but at the same time, there's also this kind of simplified understanding of democracy. So we think democracy is good because it's against terrorism, for instance. I'm giving you very simplified relations here, but so people run to these ideologies without questioning too much or sufficiently, because they are not just because they don't have the time to do their own work, which is just a part of the reason, but also because we are trying to recover what we lost there in that fall. Meaning, before with metaphysics, the world was safe in the sense that God is the gaze that guarantees, my existence. You don't have to really think about these things. But now, because we don't have God, we are exposed to this uncertainty all the time. And by having a few very strong ideas, whether political or pseudo-religious ideas, or some people remain very religious too, but we are all trying to recover some sort of certainty that we lost in that fall. Does that make sense? So that's why political ideologies can be so powerful, because they explain the world to us. So we can feel that we are we feel like we found our places in that larger kind of scheme of things that political ideologies describe. This, So, and that created all kinds of violence. Not that in this era there was no violence. Of course there was a lot of violence. That's exactly what you're going to read in the Grand Inquisitor, how the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, exercised a great deal of violence in the name of identifying heretics and, by burning them at the stake. That's the Inquisition is all about. This is why we have the Grand Inquisitor. So people Nietzsche's understanding was mostly about this fall from the grace of metaphysics, and then being left with the absurd, and then the future of that fall is this kind of political violence. So that's where Nietzsche was very, very right. And Camus found it, obviously, as any modern thinkers since the late 19th century, there's really not a great thinker today or in the 20th century who wasn't influenced by Nietzsche. So this is he is our political foundation. But at least as this author sees it, because I think it's a little bit more complicated than how this author actually presents it. Both Nietzsche's own thinking, which is actually very complex, but also Camus' understanding of Nietzsche is a little bit more complicated than this, but I think the author does a good job of giving us the essentials, and I think they're really enough to get us going in our readings in the next half of the semester. So, as he sees, as Illing, the author sees it, Camus didn't find it satisfying that Nietzsche's solution was, in the end, Übermensch, the overman or superman or whatever you like. This is exceptional man. Man in this case is not necessarily male. Mensch is the German word, and you can take it as a neutral human being. And that was not satisfying because it didn't give us any sense of how a collective, society should work. So this is what Camus wanted to supplement to Nietzschean understanding of modernity, where the best he could come up with was this vision of exceptional men. So there we have these concepts, right? Revolt, rebellion, and revolution. And revolution, Camus had already seen different versions of, and he doesn't like the effects, which is basically what Tahu explains with his experience with these organizations. Basically, the organizations are not really named, but they are supposed to be communist organizations. So, because communism was very, I don't know, popular is the right word, but the French intellectuals through the Second World War and soon thereafter, they were very supportive of communism as a way of going against, obviously the Nazi Germany, and it was a kind of antithesis to that kind of fascist running of the world. But Camus was, you remember probably from the documentary, it is mentioned that in there, Camus didn't agree with that general consensus among the French intellectuals, and he thought, okay, killing is killing, doesn't matter, and because they were gradually discovering what was going on in Russia. So there were gulags and the camps. I don't know if one can compare how bad those were, with the Nazi camps. I don't know if the comparison in this case would be absurd to even try to compare. But in any case, so he was on the side of opposing communism. Camus was, as opposed to So in that situation, he wanted to give an alternative kind of vision of politics, which does not start from this idea of revolution, because revolution always comes with kind of bullet point program. You have to do this, do that. This is what what is meant by also realism. You need to be realistic. You need to achieve this and that. And that kind of linear understanding is what he means by teleology. You need to get to the goal, the telos. So instead of that revolution, Camus was going for the idea of rebellion. And I promise that we will talk about how rebellion should be understood in relation to revolt. So we'll look at some passages here. So just to give you some of the key passages, I'll just quickly go through this with you. So on page 25, so the second line, it says, metaphysics was an umbrella term encompassing all of religion and traditional morality. These transcendental doctrines assumed that man could have a knowledge of absolute values and thus granted him adequate perception for the most important things. But then later on, if you go down, so Camus suggests that liberal modernity encountered absurdity following the Enlightenment project, but failed to go beyond it. The result of this failure, he concluded, was nihilism. So this is another point. Nihilism, what it means, and this I think Songjun mentioned when he talked about, it's more of an attitude or a stance than a program. That's related to this also, the definition of nihilism. Nihilism is not to, give up everything and be sad. That's not nihilism. Nihilism is a logical term. Nihilism really means that you don't work with limits. So it's almost like it's close to what he's calling teleology. Anything to get to, so progress. Teleology, progress, or realism in the sense that you're going toward a certain kind of end, but you never reach it. It's just like desire. You think, once I get that, I'll be satisfied. But by the time you get that, you feel, but somehow I'm still not happy. Your desire continues. So in a way, the most nihilistic thing in the human experience, one can say, is kind of it's desire. One can almost say that, but I mean it's more complicated than that. But in any case, so you understand metaphysics here, and the next page 26. He says. Nietzsche considered nihilism the decisive crisis of modernity as faith declined and metaphysics was increasingly discredited. He warned that Europe's highest values were losing their value. Meaning, when values are not, we often think that values, when we think of the word value, we think that it's something that we go toward, we're trying to uphold it. But in a way, values are there to put some limits on our completely disorderly existence. Because you start existing and there are no markers for you. So that's what culture does for you. The culture comes in to tell you what to do, what not to do. And that way you develop your own desire in relation to these limits. put down for you. So if you're left alone, there's no limitation, no prohibition, then you don't even know what you want either. So our desire is in a way reactive, fundamentally reactive. So values are kind of like that. Values kind of put limits to the world that is otherwise kind of murky, amorphous. But the values are there to give us a sense of how things are actually organized. Does that make sense? So that's what values do. So after the quotation, he says 3 lines down. Without God as a ground for values, Nietzsche believed the crisis of foundational authority was inevitable. The concern was not that God was indispensable to human values. Rather, it was that the Enlightenment project reconstructed Christian morality from critical reason without providing the transcendent ground of the latter. So, you see, this is exactly, I hope you understand, this is what I was saying here. Without God, you have nobody has this is why the courtroom scene in The Stranger is so absurd, because, I mean, although there the court of justice actually speaks the language of Christianity. So it is kind of clinging to the transcendental, metaphysical position of religion. It's trying to justify its action in the name of God. So it actually, the court is a bit of an anachronism. It wants to be a kind of religious, I mean, even today in America, when you get inaugurated, the president has to put his hand on the Bible and say, God, help me, whatever. Although Trump actually missed the Bible. Did you see that? He was supposed to put his hand on the Bible, and then he got distracted, so he didn't put his hand on the Bible. So people were asking, is he legal? Is he? I don't know, you guys missed that? Oh, that was quite something. But in any case, so we kind of still, even without being religious, we want to have recourse to the whole Christian language as well as morality to give ourselves a certain sense of order. So that's how it keeps going. So enlightenment means what? It's reason. Enlightenment means we are now a species defined by reason. So we don't look to God to understand our existence. We can use our reason to discover. That's what science does, right? So science and reason on the one hand, and God on the other hand, and by being modern, we basically said goodbye, and then we're now on the side of reason, and yet because we can't find any comparable foundational meaning which God used to provide for us, we keep slipping back to the kind of Christian morality, Christian language, or the best we can do in our secular way is to cling to political ideology. So do you see what I'm trying to say? It's kind of, we do not know yet how to make our way in this secularized civilization. So we feel lost because we cannot say that anyone has authority, but when nobody has authority, we kind of collectively go mad. This is a part of why, the reason why anxiety is such a problem today. So that's that. So to repeat that, if you go to page 28, the top paragraph, towards the end of that paragraph, it says, absent traditional sources of transcendence, meaning when there are no traditional sources of transcendence, political ideologies became grounds for meaning and action in contemporary life. That's what I was saying. Another way of saying it is, these are all repetitive because I'm just explaining but also showing you where you find these ideas in the text. So after that quotation in the middle, the next paragraph, towards the end, it says, Nietzsche clarifies the link between totalizing ideologies and the hunger for absolute truth in the face of absurdity, right? So because we are hungry for absolute truth, because we are in our absurd existence, which means we have no absolute truth. So we turn to ideologies that, I mean, the more totalizing the ideology is, the better it is for us, because that means it really makes us feel secure. So without that, we would end up with what? The third line from the bottom, a pervasive skepticism and a kind of muddled individualism. That muddled individualism is related to that question that everyone had good answers to, this idea of values that we have created ourselves, or values that are kind of collectively created and we end up just following them. So muddled individualism really means that one can very easily say, I'm an autonomous subject. I don't want to listen to anybody. I'm going to do it my way. And yet everything it's by the logic of modernity. There's nothing you can actually do, especially today when we are all wired everywhere. There's nothing you can do as an authentic loner anymore. You can't be a loner, even if you wanted to. I mean, yes, it's not impossible, but the conditions are such that, even in Mongolia, people who, the nomadic people who settle seasonally in different places, even there they get cell phone signal. So it's people who live in what's called is coffin homes in Hong Kong. Very minimal kind of residential setup. They basically live in shipping containers, and yet they have a cell phone, probably Samsung Galaxy or something. So in other words, it's really that's another level of absurd today. You may be abjectly poor, but you have a cell phone, because without that, you may not be able to apply for, some welfare check. All the governmental paperwork is now done electronically too. So in other words, you can be poor, but you have to at least have a cell phone to have any governmental help for your poverty. So you see, I'm just highlighting the absurdity that that is kind of deepening in our times, precisely because of our advancement. Because we are so advanced technologically, absurdity also advances. This is the difficulty. So on the next page, 29, right above the second quotation, with Nietzsche, Camus writes in a notebook entry, "Liberty is an exaltation. There's no concern whatsoever for limits." In other words, with Nietzsche, there's no concern for limits. So he thinks of Ubermensch as a figure of limitless kind of autonomy, limitless liberty, exalted liberty. But I mean, I'm not going to say more about that, but if you actually read Nietzsche, it's actually more complicated than that. But it works for this context for now. So as for political realism, if you go to page 31, the bottom paragraph, it says, the commitment to teleological ideals help to instantiate a particular type of political realism, which Camus associates with the legitimization of crime and violence, right? So this is exactly what Tapu was saying about his experience with those political organizations. So political realism ends up being political nihilism, which is in the middle paragraph of page 32. the middle paragraph, 3 lines down, political nihilism, which denies limits altogether. So it's the same ideas that I've already explained. So now, the most important idea is, oh, sorry, I didn't, so the point is I missed it altogether. The revolt is, as I said, it's individual. Revolt is just the initial awakening, kind of like you're doing something and then you suddenly feel this is absurd. That's revolt. So let's say you think you're a very free person, as we are all taught to think of ourselves these days, and then you're stuck doing something that you really don't want to do, and then there's a moment that where you actually respond to that absurdity for the first time. You think, I thought I was a free person. Why am I doing this again and again? And there you feel this is absurd. That's a revolt. If you don't go through that, you don't arrive at rebellion. So in other words, rebellion is a collective action, but it's a collective action by subjects that have gone through revolt. So the revolt doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It doesn't have to be like, I revolt against this. No, it's that it can be a very subtle awakening. So for instance, if you think about Camus, there's nothing dramatic about him. But when the kind of passage that I try to explain a lot about how he doesn't want to use the word rights, that's a very subtle but powerful revolt. He doesn't feel that this is right. Or to say gratitude, thank you for your generosity, blah, blah, blah. He feels this resistance to that kind of language. That is a revolt. So from that revolt, you arrive at rebellion like it's nothing. Of course I agree. This is what Camus says when people ask, oh, we're going to have this sanitary squad, and if you want to, then you can. And he says, of course I will do it. I cannot do as many hours as other people who are more, who are healthier than, me. I'm just a old guy, but within the limits of my capacity, I will do it. This is what he says. That's rebellion. So rebellion is entirely really impossible without individuals who have revolted. And in this book, we have examples like Tahu, Hugh, and of course, all of them have gone through one form or another of revolt. That's how they can team up to stage this rebellion against the plague. So that's that. And the most interesting idea here is actually creation. Creation. Why creation? So the bottom of page 33, it says, following Nietzsche, Camus adds, artistic creation is a demand for unity and a rejection of the world. Creation is thus an absurd imperative, insofar as absurdity reveals that meaning, to the extent that it exists, is created. What does that mean? So, anyone would like to say what this means? It's an absurd imperative in the sense that you have to create, right? You have to create, and you accept this imperative as such because you know something of the absurd. So you don't get to this imperative until you've gone through the recognition of the absurd. So we can say that Camus can have this dedication to writing this book it's an imperative for him, meaning he cannot not do it. He must. So it's an imperative. But he arrives at that imperative precisely because he's already gone through the revolt. Subtle as it is, he had a problem with language. He didn't like the way people use language or what language is supposed to perform for us. So that revolt made this creation, his creation, necessary, imperative. He cannot not do it. And there you go from the absurd, which means there's no foundational meaning for our existence, to a life that is actually quite meaningful. For Kant, his life is meaningful because he has the project. It's something that he has to do, right? So that is the creation of meaning. It's a meaning that is created rather than given by God or political ideology or externally given. But here, the meaning is created, value created individually, to use the wording of the question, the first presentation. So the value is created, yes.
So could you understand it as being like the difference in intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation as being what's creating the meaning for the person in that sense?
The first part again.
Sorry, like the delineation between like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, like in psychological term. In this like philosophy, like they're saying that the creation of the intrinsic is the only thing that will be able to give it the meaning, but then creation, like external motivation in that sense, wouldn't necessarily have the same creation effects because it's more.
So the opposition of intrinsic versus extrinsic,
Right.
that opposition itself is extrinsic,
Yeah.
to put it simply. In other words, that's the kind of performance that language is supposed to provide for us that Kant rejects. So in a way, he's rejecting that very opposition. Because language works by way of creating oppositions. But these oppositions are not true. They are provisional. Not that they're useless. No, we need these provisional oppositions to function at all. But many of us actually forget that they're provisional. I mean, one way in which that kind of has developed in our days, which has its own truth and problems, is this gender issue. You know, the idea that male versus female is all constructed. Yes, it is true, but then we can't live without some constructed oppositional values, because that's the kind of a basic kind of scaffolding that's keeping our world standing. So it's very important to know that these values are constructed, but also important is to know that they play a function. They are not, just because they're constructed, they're not worthless. No, not at all. They are constructed and also they're functional. Right, so his revolt is not intrinsic as opposed to extrinsically imposed some kind of condition. No, his revolt is a revolt against that very opposition of such things are intrinsic, such things are extrinsic. That division itself, he is questioning. So it's I don't know, for the lack of a better word, it's deeper. It's deeper. It's not psychological. It's actually it's in a very deep sense. It's philosophical. Yeah. So the creation is, although this is only hinted at here, they neither Camus nor Illing actually explained well enough, you know, what art is doing in this context. If anything, I feel Nietzsche does it better if you are interested in reading him directly. But in our context here, Creation is, I think that Greek reference that you mentioned is really is really good. So I can't find it. Oh, here we go. Page 37. So the last paragraph, the long paragraph, I guess there were two paragraphs, so the second paragraph. His political vision receives poetic expression in the essay Helen's Exile. Here, Camus condemns modern absolutism and praises the Greeks for their sense of beauty and measure. Admission of ignorance, rejection of fanaticism, the limits of the world and of men, the beloved face, and finally beauty. This is where we shall be on the side of the Greeks. Camus admires this attitude for two essential related reasons. First, he thinks it's more humane. Only a fidelity to limits, as epistemological and otherwise, can resist the totalizing temptation of nihilism and foundationalism. And as an artist, he finds the Greek conception of limits and balance more beautiful. I mean, a lot of people in the 19th and early 20th century, a lot of them turned towards the Greeks as a kind of lost model where, in a way, politics were not divorced from aesthetics. Aesthetics, this whole idea of beauty, how to comport your body in such a way that your body actually feels these aesthetic experiences, they were much more unified, organically connected, integrated than they are in modernity. So one thing I can say about creation is that in relation to the limits that he's been talking about a great deal, creation, just like what Camus does, he's creating and then he keeps experiencing what? Creation there is not about, I created and then I sell it. No, creation there is all about experiencing the impossibility at every turn. He's encountering the impossible. He finds it impossible to attain his ideal, which is to what? To make language act as if it's a photography, or from my mind's eye, it goes directly into my language. So this kind of a pure, unadulterated transmission from my bodily perception to language. This is impossible, and yet he cannot stop trying, right? So creation is an encounter, very intimate way in which you can experience limits. So creation is not about the end product. Creation is the process of encountering the limits. So when you have done enough of that, you cannot not be part of a rebellion. When the moment comes, you will be up, ready to join it. So this is the kind of organic understanding of a philosophical, political hero of the absurd era, if that makes sense. Okay, so so enjoy the little essay by Camus, and then we'll meet back next week. I don't know if you would repeat them, but I have an extra.
Yeah,